Hey guys, this is Avilo here bringing you Metagame update number 9. I know it's been a while since I've done these, but I'm here to bring you number 9 at the end of the beta. That's right, the beta closes today. It is over, finished. They did everything they wanted to do. Well, probably not everything that they wanted to do. But yeah, the beta ends today, March 1st. And then the game will be out in like 12 days or something. So this, I feel, is a good time to make the last metagame update for the beta, although I am planning to do more for when the actual game comes out. And I do have two main things to talk about in this one. First is the end of the beta, you know, everything involving the beta, the actual how did the metagame change, like how did the game change for all three races. And then the second thing is and this is going to depress a lot of spectators of StarCraft, but the finals of GSL is going to... Guess what? It's a Zerg versus Zerg. Who would have thought the finals of the last GSL would have been a Zerg versus Zerg? It's going to be so exciting, said no one. So, yeah, the... Tasia against Roro. I guess I'll talk about that first because it is it's also the end of Wings of Liberty essentially in the next week or so. But GSL semifinals, round of 4, Tasia against Roro. The expected to happen. A Zerg player won, and many months ago, even about a year ago after the Queen patch, I tried to warn people about this, that this, like, the Queen buff, the Overlord speed buff was too much. It was arbitrary, completely arbitrary, and that ever since that patch, Wings of Liberty has gone downhill in terms of spectatorship and tournament watching. People got tired with the game. They didn't want to see that. You know, people love. Don't get me wrong. I love watching Zerg players, like the really good ones, like Nestea and stuff like. Back in the day, like a year and a half to 2 years ago, when Nestea, Fruit Dealer, like the people that were actually winning based off of their skill, I love watching those Zerg players. I don't care if they're playing a Terran. Like you know, it was fun watching them mutiling, baneling against Terran splitting and stuff. And then in come the patch Zergs. Blizzard nerfs Terran, and this also has to do with Heart of the Swarm as well. I'm gonna lead into that, but the buffs to Zerg were a little bit too much, and what ended up happening was, as players got better at the game defending stuff with the Queens and the extra scouting from the Overlord speed, over the course of the last year and a half, we saw Zerg, they became imbalanced, and what we saw was a lack of development from the Blizzard development team, the balance team. They actually didn't patch the game for the longest time, refusing to acknowledge that there was something, you know, they had made a mistake. And so we're seeing the result of that. The proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the StarCraft. All of the recent tournaments, like, you know, I'd say like 90%, like, it's a Zerg in the Zerg. It's Zerg. People are tired of that shit. Am I gonna be watching the GSL finals? Nope. And it's not just me either. Like, a lot of other people not going to be watching this GSL finals because they don't give a shit. And for the people that... You have to be glad, you know, people are still watching. I'm sure a lot of people are just like, screw this, and they're already out the door. They're playing League of they already started League of Legends and Dota 2 and whatever else. But yeah, Zerg, it got tiring. You can't have that. Whenever something like that happens in an RTS game, it needs to be fixed or looked at immediately. And it wasn't. So that's the GSL. The final is gonna be some Zerg versus some Zerg. Just, you know, Roro against some other Zerg that I don't care about. No, nobody cares. Nobody cares. That's the real talk. Nobody gives a shit. So moving on. Moving on, the end of the beta, the end of the Heart of the Storm beta, you know, how was it? It started off great. It started off amazing. Everybody's like all chipper, like, oh my god, the beta, the expansion's coming out. This is gonna be awesome. Gonna play with a new strategy, new everything. It's gonna be balanced. in some person's crazy dream, they thought everything was gonna be perfectly balanced. So, is the game? First of all, is the game good, or does it have the potential to be good? Of course it does. It's a StarCraft game. Is it good right now? I think it's pretty fun in terms of the new units, using the new abilities. I think that there was and there is some overpowered stuff for each race. But now, back when I was saying about the Queen buff and the Overlord buff in Wings of Liberty, how that was a mistake, that was very arbitrary. What I'm worried about at the end of the beta, getting into some more real talk right here, what I'm really worried about are the complainers. And you may find that ironic because I sort of have some bad reputation as a balance liner, but no. Because right now, at the tail end of the Wings or the Heart of the Swarm beta, we saw Terran players. There was months in the beta that they weren't using. Terrans were not using Hellbats, and they were not using Widow Mines too much. And Widow Mines arguably still have the same design flaw that they had at the start of the beta, which is that they cost supply, and nothing was ever tested within the live beta going against that limitation. But the thing that worries me the most is the bias that I'm seeing, and that maybe the community sees if you're actually of the development team, because just in the past week or 2 weeks or whatever, we saw the Hellbat nerfed only 1 to 2 weeks after Terrans in the beta started to really use the Hellbat and use the Widow Mine a little more. Boom! Immediately fucking nerfed. If it's Terran, it's overpowered. If it's the Zerg Viper shutting down 20 tanks, that's excellent play and a display of skill. So, now that's something that is really worrisome, because there are a couple prominent Zerg streamers that are bitching and moaning about the Hellbats, but the thing is, they don't bitch and moan about their own units. Like the new buffed Ultralisk can two-shot Marines. Yes, it can actually two-shot Marines. The Viper can shut down Mech, really good in late game. Really good with Hydra Roach. The Hydra, you can actually use it now against Terran. And so what I would say to even critics of myself, saying that I balance line or whatever, I want the game to be balanced. I don't want one race to be stronger than the other races. That's fucking stupid. You know why? Because people stop watching the game. If it's all Zerg, 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 or all Terran, 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 people don't want to watch it, don't want to play it. So, I want the game to be balanced. The thing is, like I said, in the last 2 weeks, Blizzard has actually been listening to the Zerg complainers and prominent streamers. I'm not going to name any names, but one of them probably has a name similar to a household pet. But I'm not going to throw out any names. No names here. The thing is, the Terran using Hellbats, it's the recent thing that popped up. Nobody knew the fuck how to deal with it, even in TVT. Now, what they did was they did the cargo nerf, which is great. You can only put 2 in a dropship or in a medevac, because 4 was like insane. You could roast a mineral line immediately. It was even messing up TVT. So they nerfed it, but then they nerfed it again. Then they added in this transformation upgrade, so they double nerfed it. But then, now here's my problem with that. If they're gonna do that, they gotta do it across the board. They can't just say, it's a Terran unit, we're gonna nerf Terran because these guys are these Zerg players are complaining that they're losing to this stuff. So, I'm perfectly fine. Nerf the shit out of Terran all you want, Blizzard, but do it across all 3 races. Don't just be like, oh, it's Terran, people are complaining. After 1 week of the unit being really used, we're gonna nerf the shit out of it. But what about Vipers? It's been like a month. They were like double and triple buffed in health and blinding cloud duration. And Blizzard's like, Terran, yeah, you learned how to play, motherfucker. You learned how to play this game correctly. but what about the Hellbat? Like, why? That was overpowered. Yeah, we'll see you in Legacy of the Void, bitches. So that's the thing. So now, to get a little bit more analytical here across all three races, in terms of the metagame, let's start with Protoss. And this is, this is an issue. I actually, a lot of people probably don't know this if you don't watch my stream or don't watch me play, but I off-raced as Protoss for about 2 to 3 weeks in the beta, just all Protoss games, and I was Grandmaster as Protoss, as well as Master. I think it kicked me out when I stopped playing on my Protoss account. But what I would do, or what I figured out, I actually figured out a balance issue that everybody, I posted about it on the pro forums, that it was basically Broodlord Infestor 2.0, and I tried to get Blizzard to recognize there was a problem with this, and they still, as the beta shuts down, they still have not done anything to it. So if this is still in, I hope it's still not in the game at release, but Templar plus Tempest, the god composition for Protoss in late game against every race, it's actually Broodlord Infestor on crack. If you can imagine Broodlords and Infestors, they went to planet Xeris, the Zerg home planet or whatever, and they just started smoking weed and got high, and they're like, what can we be one day? What could we become? They're like, I know. We could transform into a Tempest with 15 range and a Templar. It'd be just like being a Broodlord, except we can shoot everything at longer range. And you can turn into a Templar Infestor. And the Infestor's like, well, gee golly, thanks. Now I'm a psionic unit, and I can be snipe. But so this composition of Protoss Air plus the Templar in every matchup, it actually goes across the board. In Protoss versus Terran, in the late game, Templar plus Tempest owns the shit out of Mech. You can start massing them, accumulating them. Now, the same thing against Zerg. In late game, all Protoss has to do is turtle correctly on 4 bases to the late game in Protoss versus Zerg. And if you do that, and you get Mass Tempest, Void Ray, plus Templar, there's actually no Zerg army that will kill that. There's nothing. And now, theoretically, once the game gets to that defensive point where you can't be killed, Protoss wins. So Zerg can't deal with that. The only thing you can argue is that Zerg could try and stop them from getting there, but you have to remember the stop them from getting there argument does not work if it's 2 equally skilled players. If it's 2 equally skilled players and there's something that can't be beaten once you get to it, what that means is with 2 equally skilled players that have mapped out the game to that point, that player is going to get to it and he'll win. So, and Protoss versus Protoss, the last Protoss thing to analyze. A lot of people don't realize this either, but the new buffed Void Ray, it basically has broken PvP into this weird, and I know this from playing Protoss as well as watching streams and keeping up with everything, but it turns into this weird game of, I build a lot of Void Rays, so you can't build Colossus. So that means, but the counter to it technically is to build Phoenixes. So if you mass Phoenix, you can beat somebody that's just massing Void Rays. So what that means is, you mass Phoenix yourself against the other Protoss player massing Phoenixes. And then it gets into this weird thing of like, okay, then I build Archons because you can't lift those with gateway units. But then I just build Void Rays again. So it's sort of like this thing like Void Ray is better than Colossus Tech, better than Robo Tech, and Robo Tech is better than Gateway Tech, but Gateway with Templar, Archon, or DT Shrine is better than Mass Phoenixes, but then the Void Ray is better than that. But the Void Ray dictates too much of the matchup right now. So from the Protoss side, it's a little bit imbalanced. Trying to think. I mean, really, it's just the mass air plus the Templars. It's just, you know, and I think Blizzard, you know, like I said, I even sent them a shit ton of Protoss replays of myself. You know, you guys know I play Turtle style, and I'm a master of the late game with every race. I actually can off race as Zerg too. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying that when players better than myself start doing late game, I usually know what the theoretically best late game will be in each matchup, and I don't think Blizzard understood that this was, you know, it took like 2-3 months for people to figure out that Templar plus Tempest was like godly, but now it's happened because everybody's so familiar with the new beta units and the new strategies that you can get there, you can get to that point. And so that's the problem with Templar plus Tempest and Void Rays and late game and units. So so what would be my suggestion to fix this? It's really easy. First of all, the Tempest was designed originally to be an anti-meta counter, and then they sort of switched it to be when Broodlord Infestor started to be showing to be insanely, you know, boring and easy. Then they made an anti-Broodlord counter instead. So what they need is they need the Tempest to not be a massable unit. It can't be something that you can just build a bajillion of and then build Templar underneath it and then get it, you know, that's just Broodlord Infestor with Templar equals Infestor, Tempest equals a better Broodlord. So they need to nerf its supply. That's the first thing. It's too supply efficient of a unit. It's too easily massable. It should be like a tactical unit that you use if your opponent is going for Broodlords and Infestors. Then you build like 5-6 of them, and that'll help you snipe the Broodlords one by one with target fire. But it also gives the Zerg an opportunity to snipe the Tempest because there won't be infinity of them with Templar using Psystorm on Corruptors and stuff. So that's the first thing. It's too supply efficient. They need to revert the supply, I would say, to 8. And I know that's a drastic number because the Tempest used to be 6 supply, but it needs to be 8 supply. They don't want this problem down the road where Tempest Templar, you know, it's too massable, too easy. It's a 1A unit really, and it's long range. It's too easy to use. So it needs to be like 8 supply. And I'm going to give you the second reason for this. That also brings the carrier back into the forefront. If you make the Tempest a specialized unit that is really supply intensive, that means you can't just mass Tempest. I mean, you may still be able to pull something off like that crazily, but it's going to dissuade people from just making Tempests and making Templars and making massive amounts of cannons and sitting there and turtling over top of them. I know firsthand how good that is. So yeah, it needs to cost 8 more supply, and then you know, it gets rid of the Tempest being massed, but then the carrier comes back into play because people are like, wow, the carrier is actually pretty good. We can make those and maybe make a couple Tempests. Alright, and the second thing is health. It has way too much health. It should be a unit that Terran and Zerg and even other Protosses can snipe, that you have to protect. Right now, if you shoot 2 Seeker Missiles at a Tempest, I think it stays alive. Or I think it may even be able to take 3 Seeker Missiles. I'm not sure about that, but it's pretty beefy. So it needs to go down quicker so that you can't just mass Tempest. The other thing is, if they, and it does 2 things. It helps Zerg late game. It makes it so Protoss can't just mass these things. And against Terran, it actually indirectly buffs Terran Mech by nerfing the Tempest supply, because what this means is, indirectly, Terran doesn't have to build as many Vikings to combat this mass air army with Templar underneath it. So that's the other reason, those 2 matchups, and then Protoss vs. Protoss, it's a mirror matchup, so you can sort of let it do its own thing there. So that's the main thing main Protoss metagame issue at the end of the beta that needs to be patched and balanced. So moving on to Zerg. ZVZ, mass mutalisk versus mass mutaling, with, you know, lots of counterattacking. You can wall off easier with spines now. I don't know about ZVZ that much. It just seems like, to be honest, the better unit composition is the standard endgame Wings of Liberty, Infestor, Roach, Hydra, you know, and then eventually in the late game to Broodlords. With the fungal being a projectile now, it's not, and Mutalisks also got a buff, so they're faster and they regenerate health, which I think is good because it brings back that really high-paced, fast-paced action harassment to Zerg, because you can go mutas now. But I think ZVZ will eventually go back to being infestor-based. It's just people right now aren't too good with the projectile fungal. They all suck with it, to be honest. You'll see a lot of players there's funny story, a lot of players forgot or are not building infestors in the beta. By the end of the beta, a lot of people weren't building them. They're still good. They have increased fungal range. Essentially a 12 range fungal. It's just a projectile now, so it's harder to use, which is good. I don't know about the 12 range. So ZVT. Now something I think people started to figure out by the end of the beta is the Viper. Viper and the Ultralisk are actually incredibly powerful against Terran, against Mech and Bio. The Ultra, it two-shots Marines now. It's actually really strong. I don't know if it's too strong. I don't think a sample size of games has been played to determine that. But the last games I played against Zerg, the Ultralisk felt really incredibly strong. And the reason I'm worried about that is because it basically beats everything on the ground now. But they nerfed the Widowmine they nerfed some Terran stuff like the Hellbat and the Widowmine, but they didn't, like I said before, they nerfed the Terran stuff, but then they didn't touch up any of the Zerg stuff at the same time. So they left everything that they made stronger about Zerg the same essentially, but they nerfed some other stuff, and I don't think that's good. A lot of the Zerg players started to complain at the end of the beta, and a lot of the issue was a learn to play issue, surprisingly. A lot of the Zergs that were complaining were patch Zergs from Wings of Liberty that got a free ride for the last year and a half after the Queen buff and the Overlord speed buff, and so they were used to making drone, Queen, third base, Terran tries to do some attack, and the Queens just defend everything, and now I'm on 60, 70 drones, and I can just make units, and I'm fine, and then go into hive tech really early. So a lot of the Zergs, it was a learn to play issue, and they actually got a lot of really, really good stuff. But the really top level Zergs haven't switched over fully to Heart of the Swarm beta, although by the end, I'm sure people started to. But Zerg is actually really strong in the beta. And, you know, like I said before, it's really worrisome, this QQ and the complaining in the community especially from prominent Zerg streamers. They're trying to, like, sway people to buff Zerg more, buff them more, nerf Terran and Protoss, like, fuck, man. I can't just sit here and mask Broodlord Infestors anymore. This is a fucking dumb game. So that's a really worrisome attitude. The Viper, really strong. Ultralisk, really strong late game. If you're not winning games with an Infestor that has a 12 range fungal growth, get the fuck out. Stop. Get the fuck out. Okay? That's all that needs to be said. If you can't win with fungal growth that's 12 range, get the fuck out. Alright, and Zerg versus Protoss. Viper, once again, it's really good in this matchup for yanking Colossus, blinding Cloud armies. You can go Hydra Roach. The Hydralisk, that's the other thing. It's interesting. The Hydra is usable now because of the blinding Cloud. Once you get to the Viper, you can even rush Hive just for blinding Cloud usage with speed Hydras and Roaches, it's amazing. The Hydra doesn't really suck anymore. It's actually really good. And the interesting part was we actually saw some of the Wings of Liberty, GSL, and Kespa players starting to use these older Hydralisk-based strategies and even mass muta base trade strategies at the end of the, the Wings of Liberty period. And I think it's because they saw in the beta, hey, these units are potentially good. Let's try and do some of these things to throw people off, and it was actually working a bit. So yeah. Oh, and the muta. Once again, it's faster and it regens HP out of that, or when it's not fighting. So really good buff. And the other thing is the Swarm Host. Now, my feedback on this unit would be it's a really boring unit, and here's why. A lot of people are gonna say, but isn't it cool? It's like the Lurker. Not really. The Swarm Host makes the game literally slow down to a snail's pace, and I know the irony in that because I play a really defensive turtle style, but this is just like really bad because of you just basically it's more free units like the Infested Terrans and the Broodlings from Broodlord. It's basically a Broodlord on tier 2 tech. If you get and here's the other issue with the Swarm Host is, if you make 2, 3, 4, 5, they suck. Zerg, it's a shitty unit. If you just make a couple of them, like you can't just make a couple. If you go Swarm Host, you need to make like 15 or 20 of them. And I don't really like a unit. I don't think that's a good design of a unit where if you build only a couple of them, they're crappy. But if you build suddenly a ton of them, then you can like just go AFK and let the free units. It's sort of like one of those use map settings maps, those evolve maps, or the ones where like you would send a stream of units at the opponent and they send a stream of units at you. Except the Zerg player can just like, if they can get like 20 of these and rally them to you, then you're sitting there. And it's not any more fun for the Terran, to be honest. You just sit there with siege tanks and stuff. You just have to, like, sit there, and they're sitting there, and then you just both make your ultimate armies. You both like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to get as many Ravens as humanly possible, and I guess he's going to make as many Broodlords, Infestors, and Corruptors as humanly possible. We're going to sit here another half an hour while these Swarm Host Locusts come at me and my siege tanks just sit here and fire while we both just make ultimate armies and then have one huge orgasmic battle where we blow our Yamato gun loads and Infestor Fungals shoot their load across the map, and I'm just like, well played, sir. It took an extra half an hour to reach this point. So the Swarm Host, I don't really like it. It's not micro-intensive at all. It's a boring unit. The Zerg player can make them. I've actually played games where I'm playing the game. The Zerg player burrows the Swarm Host, rallies them to my base, and I'm like wondering, like, in the back of my head, is he AFK right now? Like, is he at his computer? Because he could have left the room and these things are just rallying to my base. As a matter of fact, I think I could just leave the room right now and go get me a drink, and then come back 20 minutes later with this huge economy, and he has this huge economy, and then the guy like pauses the game and be like, oh sorry, I was AFK. I'm like, what? You were playing the game this whole time? So that's my final thoughts on the Swarm Host. It's not too good of a design right now. I think they should make it into, well, they should just get rid of it at this point. I know Zerg players won't be happy with me saying that, but honestly, just get rid of it. It's really dumb and boring. If they changed it or tweaked it, maybe to like allow for more aggressive play from both players, like you can actually attack into them easier, and the Zerg player can actually attack with them easier directly, rather than just like sitting there, then it would be better. But as it is right now, I'm just like, you know, I don't know if the guy's at the keyboard, if he went shopping. I just don't know. I can't see across the internet at his keyboard to know if he left. So that's Zerg and Terran at the end of the beta. Terran OP, they won a couple games on ladder with Hellbats. Those motherfuckers, they should never win. Terran OP, they built Ravens and they actually are useful now. That's not fucking fair. I'm used to getting to the end of the game with mass infestors and broodlords and then just winning. What is this? What is this shit? My invisible watch says the game timer hit 15 minutes, and I play Zerg, so I should have won by now. So I think the biggest change to come from the beta for Terran is that Blizzard actually listened about the Raven, feedback on the Raven, whether it was for me and other people as well. They made the Raven more accessible as a unit, so now you build one, and you're just like, yeah, I can do stuff. It doesn't suck shit. Whereas before, you would build one and it would just like, it'd be like, Raven is online. And I'd be like, okay, Raven, go do something. And then I'd watch and see like spit out on auto turret. I'd be like, that's all you can do? And he'd be like, Raven now getting fungled and killed. Or the thing is, they made the new Seeker missile is really interesting because you can micro against it really easily by picking out the unit that's targeted and sending it into your opponent's army, or just by moving your unit away and then the Seeker doesn't even do anything. And the energy cost is 75, which means with the Corvid reactor, which you research late game, like 99% of the time, that means it's restricted to late game, A, and B, if you are playing this late game scenario in TVZ, where you're both remaxing, and the Zerg player remaxes on like 15 corruptors, and builds some broodlords and has corruptors and infestors, and you have your starports up, and you build 5 ravens, you now have 5 Seeker missiles that you can use really cost efficiently, potentially cost efficient against the Zerg's. The Zerg's endgame mechanic is all this larva, and now you have something to fight against that in the late game. You have the Raven that can help with the cost efficiency to fight against that with the hunters, the Raven Hunter Seeker missile. You have one right away. The Raven's useful. Your investment can pay itself off. It's no longer, utterly useless. So that's the single most best change to come from the beta, is them actually balancing the Raven for late game. Really, really good change. It's they even made the missile more avoidable, and you can micro against it. So really good change. Terran players should be extremely happy. Zerg players, if you don't split up your corruptors, you're gonna die. But even in Terran versus Terran in late game, like air versus air, if you shoot out 500 Seekers and the opponent shoots out their 100 Seekers, you're both microing to pick out those units that have been 100 Seekered and split them off, or even send them into your opponent's army. It's actually pretty good. To micro get, for and against for each player. So really good change, best change ever. Now about the Hellbat and the Widowmine. Now that's Terran versus Zerg. Terran versus Protoss. The big question is on everybody's mind: did Blizzard succeed? Is Mech TVP more viable? Can you play Mech TVP? And the answer right now is sort of, but not really. And I'm going to go into Mech TVP, and then I'm going to talk about Oracles, because I forgot to talk about that. But Mech TVP, it's still in a pretty crappy state, but I don't think it's... Well, every patch in the beta, they ended up nerfing Mech TVP in some way, unintentionally. Like, for example, the last patch, they now made the Hellion-Hellbat transformation between Hellion and Hellbat require an extremely expensive upgrade even more expensive than the previous siege mode, and a lot of time, which hurt mech TVP. And this is, you know, like I said, it's really worrisome. They did it to help early game Zerg versus Terran, because Zerg players were having trouble in the early game, aka they were only building drones and dying to new stuff that they weren't countering properly. And so they immediately nerfed the Hellbat, added this upgrade in, and it affected mech Terran versus Protoss quite adversely. It's harder to go mech now because of this. It was a really bad change, you know. So mech TVP, I think they basically failed pretty hardcore. The other reason is because of the Tempest plus Templar in Terran vs Protoss. Really easy to get to against mech. I've actually done tests in the unit tester. You need 27 Vikings to take down about 18 Tempest. If it's just in a vacuum scenario, just those Vikings against the Tempest, and the Vikings don't even trade efficiently. You end up losing a lot of Vikings. So that now you add in Templar. If you even get off like 2 Psystorms, it's no contest. The Tempest utterly obliterate everything, and you can keep building more Tempest, and the Terran has to build more Vikings. And what ends up happening is you trade, but you trade horribly inefficient against the Tempest, and then Protoss just makes whatever they want, you know, from their gateways, mass gateways. So that's Terran versus Protoss mech. Blizzard has, I give them an F-. They've utterly failed in every respect on making this more viable, you know, as a way to play Terran versus Protoss. And they keep giving it, they keep actually nerfing it along the road. So yeah, TVT is roughly the same, and the Hellbat drop is really good in every matchup. But it's sort of, the Hellbat drop is really good, and I don't know, it's arguable, because a blue flame drop can potentially do more damage than a Hellbat drop. But then there's but if the opponent doesn't move their workers or notice it in time, then the Hellbat drop does way more damage than a blue flame, like a normal blue flame Hellion drop. So it's weird. But overall, I think the Hellbat drop's probably stronger, and the reason is because you can heal the Hellbats, and that, I think they need to. I've said it so many times. I posted it. I've tried to give feedback. The Hellbat needs to be a mech unit, not a bio unit. And the reason this is because in these isolated scenarios where you have like 3 or 4 medevacs around the map with 2 Hellbats in them each, and you drop in multiple locations, it's a problem, because if you drop the Hellbats, you can't fight against the Hellbats with your workers, obviously. But if you don't have the minimum defense of those 2 Hellbats there, and you just do a little bit of damage to the Hellbats, they get healed to full health from that medevac that dropped them out. And so it makes Hellbat drops really deadly against across, even in TVT, every race. And it also, being biological, makes Hellbats worse in Terran vs Protoss against Archons. They take extra damage from Archons. Every Archon does an extra 10 damage against a Hellbat. And what that means is it's like there's an extra Zealot with every Archon you make, which is terrible. So yeah. And the final nail in the coffin for mech TVP, the tank, siege tank, sucks still. And the reason this is, if a Protoss knows what they're doing, the Immortal and the Tempest hard counter any Terran that goes mech with a lot of tanks. The more supply you have in tanks, and the more supply they have in Tempest and Void Rays, the worse it is for the Terran player. So tanks, I think Thors and Hellbats and Ghosts is much better than, with a couple tanks, is better than, a lot of tanks, a lot of Hellbats. So we'll see, though. It could develop further. And now TVP, the final thing, which is really ruining the matchup, or which is not balanced about the matchup, is the Oracle right now, and the Mothership in combination. Now this, what I'm trying to describe is very similar to the Queen patch and the Overlord Speed patch in Wings of Liberty. It's not the Oracle alone that makes TVP early game really bad for Terran right now. if the game progresses past mid-game, then the matchup is balanced. It's pretty good if you're going bio. But it's this early game build order luck and rolling of the dice from the Protoss. They can do one base Blink Stalker all in with the Mothership Core. They can go proxy Stargate in any random... towards the end of the beta, every game was basically proxy Oracle or even a Stargate in the Protoss' base with an Oracle into an expansion with the Mothership Core to defend with Planetary Nexus. And Terran only has 2 viable builds in the matchup. 1-1-1, which can still die to an Oracle, and which dies to the Protoss. You know, economically, they get their Nexus up at the expansion. Mothership Core Planetary Nexus defense defends the 1-1-1, so Terran loses. You cannot fight 1 base against 2 base with the Mothership Core Planetary Nexus defense plus Oracles out of the map. Now, the reason the Oracle breaks this matchup is because simply by going for 1 or 2 Oracles, the Terran player has to make 1, 2, even sometimes 3 missile turrets, 1 in your main, 1 in the natural, and then maybe sometimes 1 at your production. But at least 2 and a bunker at the front. And the problem here is you have to build the turrets to defend against the Oracle, but if you build the turrets, then you can't defend against other all-ins like a Blink Stalker Mothership Core all-in, or or Archon, or like a 4-gate even. So you get into this weird thing where if the only 2 viable builds are a 1-1-1 or a 1-Rax Fast Expand, and the 1-1-1, if they know how to deal with it, then you're on 1 base against 2 and you lose because of the Mothership Core Planetary Nexus. And so if you do a 1-Rax FE, you're really vulnerable to all this wide variety of Protoss all-ins, even including Immortal all-ins, Warp Prism all-ins, Void Ray all-ins. There's a lot of stuff that you may just die. So you have to make 2 missile turrets and 1 bunker minimum. That's 300 minerals. What does that mean? That means Protoss builds a 400 mineral Nexus. That means they can get their Nexus up, and then they have their Mothership Core after that, and they can defend anything. So it's the risk versus reward is really off balance in the early game build order matchup in Protoss versus Terran, because you can go Oracles completely risk free, and I know a lot of Protoss players are going to disagree with that, but it was by the end of the beta it was shown you could do this risk free because the Terran has to invest in this defense. They have to like over defend against everything, so they have to make the turrets, they have to make the 1 bunker, and that means you get a Nexus for free, which means you're essentially you're equal. And this is not taking into account that the Oracle can actually free win the game if it kills like 10 SCVs. Let's say the Terran doesn't build missile turrets and you go for the Oracle, you can potentially kill a lot of Marines, which is army value of the Terran, or you can kill a ton of SCVs, which puts the Terran behind, and then you get your Nexus for free, and then you're ahead. So there's almost no loss in going for these proxy Oracle strategies, or even in-base Oracle strats into your expansion. And that's bad. And then of course you can do any of the other all. You can go Dark Templar, faster DT Shrine. You can go for a 3-gate Void Rail in. You can do so many other things. So the risk versus reward in the opening is not there when Protoss can do this incredibly huge wide array of things, and one of them has no drawback, the Oracle into expansion. You can even go expansion into Oracle. Whereas the Terran openings, you can go 1-1-1, which it can't beat the Planetary Nexus if they do it right. And then you can go with a 1-Rax Fast Expand, which you can still die to any of this stuff. So that's the last thing at the end of the beta that I felt Terran versus Protoss versus Terran was a little bit out of whack, out of balance. There shouldn't be all these things that can give Protoss a free win, but then if it fails, Protoss is still perfectly fine in the game because they have the Planetary Nexus defense. That's a little bit out of line balance-wise, so that should be looked at, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm trying to think here what else to go over. Other than that, the Terran things, the Hellbat, pretty good in general, really strong unit. I'm not saying it's not strong as a unit, by the way, guys. It's probably one of the stronger units in the beta right now, and that's why Zerg players are complaining about it. But I think it's really good for Terran Mech. It made Mech in general better, even in TVP. But yeah, the Hellbat is a really strong addition. The Widowmine, okay, let me go over this. The Widowmine, very arguable. It costs 2 supply, so sometimes it'll be amazing, and this is usually against the lower ranked players, where you'll be like, wow, he just walked into a bunch of mines and I got my money's worth. But then you start playing the Grandmasters and the really good Protosses that actually control their units, like Brood War style, with an observer and picking off the Widow Mines. You can have 5 Widow Mines that do nothing because the Protoss player knows how to deal with them, and you're just like, I guess I lose now. Because the Widow Mines didn't actually kill any units. So the Widow Mine is still, I don't like it as a unit. It's useful. I think it's more useful against Zerg than it is against Protoss. Against Zerg it has uses. You can use it to sort of zone out Vipers, and it's actually necessary against Roach, Hydra, Viper, because if you don't make Widow Mines and they land Blinding Clouds on your army, the only thing that can technically even fire during the battle is going to be Widow Mines. So it's actually necessary. Even though Vipers technically, I think, could be overpowered, the Widow Mine in late game TVZ technically could be overpowered, and they both counter each other pretty well. So, but Terran versus Protoss, I think Protoss has a lot of ways to deal with it that just make Widow Mines a bad investment. Like, you should, instead of a 2 supply mine, you would rather have like a Ghost or another Viking or even a Raven or just another Hellbat or Medevac or something, like basically anything other than a Widow Mine. And I know, you know, there's a lot of QQ going on, and Widow Mine needs to be nerfed, but that's people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. You'll see after a month or two of, as people get into the swing of things in Terran versus Protoss, everybody's going to be saying, wow, Widow Mines are sort of underpowered. I couldn't believe this. I thought they were overpowered before, but every time I see a Terran player use them a lot, they lose. In Terran versus Protoss, that is. So that's where I think that's heading. It's at the lower levels, it's really overpowered because people walk into them, they don't control their units. And then at the higher levels, it's ridiculously underwhelming. It's like, wow, I can't even use these against Protoss. I get punished for doing it. But against Zerg, really good. In TVT, they're also really good because they force scans instead of mules or making a Raven. TVP, meh, it's not that great. So those are my last thoughts, guys. Overall, I think the beta went really well. I hope Blizzard listens to feedback rather than just QQ. You notice a lot of the stuff I'm saying is feedback for every race. Each race has some stuff that I think is too strong, maybe too weak. Like the Hellbat healing, it needs to change back. Like to take what I would say metagame wise needs to be looked at immediately before the game launches. For Protoss, Oracles in TVP, Tempest and Templar in every matchup in the late game. Tempest needs supply nerf. For Zerg, I would say what needs to be looked at is the Blinding Cloud. It might actually be too strong in its what's it called, in the overall radius that it has. I think the radius is actually too big. It should be more of a finesse unit. Because I've played games and seen games where the Terran has split their tanks perfectly like that, and then 6 Vipers come in. That's 12 Blinding Clouds. The entire Terran army is covered and nothing is shooting. And that's not good. It shouldn't be able to cover that much stuff. So I think the Viper Blinding Cloud radius might need to be tweaked back down a little bit, as well as what was the other thing? Well, I think the Ultralisk also we're gonna see pretty soon as more Zergs start switching over from Wings of Liberty to the beta. It's gonna switch, and the Ultra is gonna be really too good by the end of or by the start of Heart of the Storm beta. So the last thing for Terran, now the Hellbat healing should be removed so that it's only a mech unit and not a bio unit that's being healed in drops. So that's the last thing that needs to be looked at for Terran, and yeah, that's about it. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will do more of these updates, and see you guys later. Peace.